The kindness. The cargo ship wanderer drifted through the darkness of space like a dead leaf on a black ocean. Its engines had failed 3 days ago, and now the ship moved only because space itself carried it forward. Inside, 12 humans waited to die. Captain stood on the bridge and stared at the emergency lights. They blinked red over and over, telling him what he already knew. The main reactor was dead. The backup systems were failing. In 4 days, maybe 5, the oxygen would run out. He had sent distress signals, hundreds of them, but they were too far from Earth, too far from any human colony. No one was coming. Park, the youngest crew member at only 22 years old, brought him a cup of recycled water. Her hands were steady, but could see the fear in her eyes. She was the ship's communications officer, and she had been the one to calculate how long they had left. "Any response?" asked, though he knew the answer. Shook her head. "Nothing, Captain. We're in empty space. The nearest human station is 6 weeks away at full speed." She paused. "We have 5 days of air." Nodded slowly. He had been a captain for 20 years. He had faced pirates, storms, mechanical failures. But he had never faced this, the simple, quiet mathematics of death. In the crew quarters below, the others were handling it in their own ways. The chief engineer was still working on the engines. He refused to give up. He had taken apart every system, checked every wire, searched for any spark of hope. But there was nothing. The reactor core had cracked. Without a replacement, the Wanderer was just a metal coffin. Lee, the medical officer, moved from person to person, checking on them, talking to them, keeping them calm. She was older than most of the crew, with gray in her hair and deep lines around her eyes. She had seen death before. She knew how to face it with dignity. On the 4th day, something changed. Was at her station, more out of habit than hope, when her console lit up. A signal, not human. The frequency was wrong, the pattern unfamiliar, but it was a signal. "Captain," she called out, her voice cracking, "someone's out there." Rushed to her side. Together, they watched as a shape appeared on their sensors. A ship, small and strange, with curved wings that looked like the wings of a moth. It was beautiful in a way that human ships never were. "That's a vessel," said, coming up from the engine room. His face was covered in grease and exhaustion, but his eyes were wide. "I've seen pictures. They're traders, scholars, peaceful people. They were known throughout the galaxy, though few humans had ever met them. They were an old species, older than humanity by thousands of years. They had no military, no weapons. They built libraries and markets, not warships. Other species often bullied them, stole from them, pushed them around. They never fought back." The communication console crackled, and a voice came through. It was soft and musical, like wind through leaves. "Human vessel, we have received your distress signal. We are coming to help." Grabbed the microphone. "This is Captain of the cargo ship Wanderer. Our reactor is dead. We have less than 2 days of oxygen remaining. Can you assist?" There was a pause. When the voice returned, it carried a note of sadness. "We are a small ship. We have limited fuel and supplies. If we help you, we may not have enough to complete our own journey." Another pause. "But we cannot leave you to die. We are coming." The ship docked with the Wanderer 3 hours later. The airlock opened, and for the first time in his life, stood face to face with an alien. Elder was tall and thin, with 4 arms and large, dark eyes that seemed to hold the light of distant stars. His skin was pale and soft, covered in fine patterns that shifted like oil on water. When he moved, his wings, folded against his back, rustled gently. He looked out with those deep, ancient eyes and spoke in careful English. "I am Elder of this vessel. We have brought fuel cells and oxygen. It will be enough to reach the nearest station." Felt his throat tighten. "You said this would cost you, that you might not complete your own journey." Tilted his head in a gesture that might have been a smile. "That is true. We were traveling to a meeting of our people, an important gathering." He made a soft sound, almost like a sigh. But gatherings can wait, your lives cannot. The crew worked alongside the humans, connecting fuel cells, transferring oxygen, repairing what they could. They were gentle and careful, moving with a grace that made the humans feel clumsy and rough. Worked beside a young named, who showed him techniques that human engineers had never imagined. In just 6 hours, they had restored basic power to the Wanderer. But it wasn't enough to get them home. The engines were too damaged. "We will tow you," announced. "Our ship is small, but we can pull you to the trading station at Marker 7. It will take 3 weeks." Stared at him. 3 weeks, but your fuel, your supplies. "We will manage," said simply. "We have enough if we are careful." For 3 weeks, the tiny ship pulled the much larger Wanderer through space. They shared their food, their water, their oxygen. They gave until they had almost nothing left. When they finally reached Marker 7, the ship was running on fumes. Their food was gone. Their water was nearly empty. They had given everything to save 12 humans they had never met. Stood in the airlock with, preparing to say goodbye. He held out a credit chip, everything he had, everything the crew had pooled together. "Please," he said, "let us pay you, let us give you something." Looked at the chip, then looked at with those ancient, knowing eyes. "You were dying," he said softly. "We could help, that is enough." He turned and walked back to his ship. Watched the vessel depart, small and fragile against the vast darkness of space. He stood there for a long time, the credit chip still in his hand. Beside him, Young spoke quietly. "We should remember this, Captain. We should remember them." Nodded slowly. "We will," he said. "Humans always remember." He didn't know how true those words would become. The debt remembered. 15 years had passed since the rescue of the Wanderer. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had changed. Park was no longer a young communications officer on a cargo ship. She was now a senior diplomat for the Unified Human Council, one of the most powerful voices in human politics. Her hair had grown long, and there were new lines around her eyes, but she still carried herself with the same quiet strength she had shown in those dark days aboard the Wanderer. She sat in her office on Earth, in a tall building that looked out over the city of Seoul. The morning sun came through the windows and painted everything in gold, but was not looking at the beautiful view. She was looking at her screen, reading intelligence reports that made her blood run cold. The Dominion was moving. The Dominion was a reptilian empire that had been growing for centuries. They were conquerors, slavers, destroyers. They took what they wanted and crushed anyone who stood in their way. For years, they had stayed in their own corner of the galaxy, fighting small wars with their neighbors. But now they had set their eyes on something bigger. Read the reports again and again. The Dominion fleet was massive, over 600 warships. They were gathering at the edge of space, preparing to invade. They had nothing to fight back with. No military, no weapons, no allies. The Galactic Council had already voted. They would not interfere. They were not important enough. Their world was not valuable enough. Let the Dominion have them. Felt sick. She closed the reports and opened a different file. An old file from 15 years ago, the incident report from the Wanderer. She had read it many times over the years, but today it felt different. Today it felt urgent. She found the name she was looking for, Elder. According to the records, was still alive. He was old now, even by standards, but he still served as an elder on Prime. He probably had no idea that a massive fleet was coming to destroy his world. Stood up and walked to the window. Below her, the city of Seoul buzzed with life. Millions of humans going about their day, living their lives, unaware of what was happening in a distant corner of the galaxy. Did they remember? Did anyone remember what they had done? She thought about the crew of the Wanderer. Captain had died 5 years ago, peacefully in his sleep. Was now the head of human engineering, designing ships that were faster and stronger than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Lee had retired to a small village and spent her days teaching medicine to young people. They all remembered, but would it be enough? Made her decision. She picked up her communicator and called an emergency session of the council. 3 hours later, she stood in the great hall of the Unified Human Council. Around her sat the leaders of human civilization, presidents, generals, admirals, scientists. They were the most powerful humans in existence, and they were all looking at her. "Thank you for coming," began. Her voice was calm and steady. "I have called this session to discuss the situation in space." There were murmurs in the crowd. Most of them had read the same intelligence reports. Most of them had the same reaction as the Galactic Council. Why should humans care about the... Raised her hand for silence. 15 years ago, I was a young officer on a cargo ship called the Wanderer. Our reactor failed in deep space. We were going to die. She paused. A ship found us. They saved our lives. They gave us their fuel, their food, their oxygen. They towed us to safety for 3 weeks, nearly killing themselves in the process. She looked around the room. When our captain tried to pay them, their elder refused. He said, "You were dying, we could help. That is enough." The room was silent now. "They have no military," continued. "They have no weapons. They have spent their entire history building libraries and schools and markets. They have never hurt anyone, and now the Dominion is coming to destroy them." She took a deep breath. "The Galactic Council refuses to help. They say they are not important enough. They say it's not their problem." Her eyes flashed with anger. "But it is our problem because we owe them. We owe them everything." An admiral in the front row spoke up. "With respect, Ambassador Park, we're talking about the Dominion. They have 600 warships. We have maybe 200 in that sector. Are you asking us to go to war for a debt that's 15 years old?" Looked at him steadily. "Yes," she said, "that's exactly what I'm asking." The room erupted in noise. People were shouting, arguing, debating. Some said she was crazy. Some said she was right. Some said they needed more time to think. Waited for the noise to die down. Then she spoke again. "I know this is a big decision. I know we might lose ships. We might lose lives. But I need you to understand something about who we are." She walked to the center of the room. "Humans are not the strongest species in the galaxy. We're not the oldest but we have something that other species don't understand. We remember. We remember every kindness. We remember every wrong. And we pay our debts." She looked at each face in the room. "If we we abandon everything we believe in. We tell the galaxy that our word means nothing, that our gratitude means nothing, that we will let our friends die because it's easier than fighting for them." She shook her head. "I won't accept that. I don't believe any of you will accept that either." There was a long silence, then stood up. He was older now, his hair gray, but his eyes still burned with the same fire they had when he was a young engineer refusing to give up on a broken ship. "I was there," he said. "I watched them give everything they had to save us. I have never forgotten. I never will forget." He looked at and nodded. "I vote yes." One by one, others stood up. Lee, who had come out of retirement just for this meeting, old friends from the Wanderer, young officers who had grown up hearing the story. The vote was called. It was unanimous. Humanity would go to war. As the council members filed out, stayed behind, she looked out the window at the stars just beginning to appear in the evening sky. Somewhere out there, Elder was waiting, probably unaware that help was coming. She whispered into the darkness. "We remember, we always remember." The warning. Warlord sat on his throne aboard the Dominion flagship Iron Fang and watched the stars burn. He was massive, even for his species, 7 feet of muscle and scale, with claws that could tear through steel and teeth that had tasted the blood of 100 enemies. His eyes were yellow and cold, like the eyes of a snake. Around him, his generals stood at attention, waiting for his orders. They had gathered the greatest fleet the Dominion had ever assembled. 600 warships, each one bristling with weapons. Enough firepower to destroy a planet. Enough soldiers to conquer a dozen worlds. And they were all pointed at Prime. Smiled, showing his teeth. They were weak, soft. They had no army, no weapons, no will to fight. Taking their world would be like stepping on an insect. It would be over in hours. The galaxy would watch. The galaxy would learn. The Dominion took what it wanted, and no one could stop them. "My lord," one of his generals said, bowing low, "we have received a transmission from the humans." Tilted his head. Humans. He knew of them, small, soft mammals who had only recently begun to explore the stars. They were clever, he had heard, good at building things, but they were weak. Their ships were slow. Their weapons were primitive. They were beneath his notice. "What do they want?" he asked, not really caring about the answer. "They wish to speak with you directly, my lord. A video transmission." Laughed, a deep rumbling sound that echoed through the bridge. "Very well. Let me hear what the little mammals have to say. It should be amusing." The main screen flickered to life and a human face appeared. A male, young by human standards, with black hair and calm, steady eyes. He wore a simple uniform with no medals, no decorations. Behind him could see the bridge of a human ship, small, simple, unimpressive. "I am," the human said, "chief strategist of the Unified Human Council. I speak on behalf of humanity." Leaned forward slightly. "Speak then. I am busy preparing to conquer a world. Make it quick." Did not flinch. His expression did not change. "They are under our protection," he said. "We are ordering you to withdraw your fleet from space immediately." For a moment there was silence, then began to laugh. His generals joined in, their harsh voices filling the bridge with cruel amusement. "You are ordering me," said when he finally stopped laughing. "Little mammal, do you know who I am? I have conquered 50 worlds, I have crushed armies, I have burned cities, and you think you can give me orders?" Waited for the laughter to stop. Then he spoke again, his voice still calm. "I know exactly who you are, warlord. You are a conqueror, a destroyer. You take what you want because no one has been strong enough to stop you." He paused. "That changes today." Laughter died, his eyes narrowed. "You have maybe 200 ships in this sector," he said. "I have 600. Your weapons are toys compared to ours. Your soldiers are soft and weak. What exactly do you think you can do to stop me?" Leaned forward slightly. "Let me tell you a story," he said. 15 years ago, a human cargo ship called the Wanderer broke down in deep space. The crew was going to die. No one was coming to help them. They were alone. He paused, making sure was listening. A ship found them that had almost nothing, a small ship, limited supplies, a long journey ahead of them. But they stopped anyway. They gave the humans their fuel, their food, their oxygen. They towed the human ship to safety for 3 weeks. They nearly killed themselves doing it. Made a dismissive gesture. "A foolish act, they are weak, this proves nothing." When the human captain tried to pay them, continued, ignoring the interruption, the elder refused. He said, "You were dying, we could help. That is enough." His eyes locked on Tus. "They helped us when they had nothing to gain. They saved our people when it cost them everything. And now you want to destroy them." He shook his head slowly. "We can't allow that." Stood up from his throne, his massive form casting a shadow across the screen. "You can't allow it," he roared. "You are nothing, your species is nothing. I will crush your little fleet, and then I will burn the world to ash, and then I will come for Earth. I will make your people slaves. I will." "No," said quietly, "you won't." Something in his voice made stop. There was no fear in those calm eyes, no desperation, just certainty. "You misunderstand us," said. "We are not threatening you because we think we are strong. We know you have more ships. We know you have more soldiers. We know we might lose." He leaned back in his chair. We are threatening you because we owe a debt, and humans always pay their debts, always." He let those words hang in the air. "We will fight you with everything we have. We will die if we have to, but we will not abandon not today, not ever." Stared at the screen, trying to understand what he was seeing. He had threatened countless species before. He had seen fear, desperation, begging. He had never seen this quiet, unshakable certainty. "You are insane," he finally said. Smiled for the first time. It was not a warm smile. "Maybe," he said, "but there's something else you should know about humans, Warlord." He leaned forward again. "We never forget a kindness, but we also never forgive a wrong. If you attack you will make an enemy of humanity, not just today but forever. We will hunt you, we will find you, and we will make you pay." He paused. "We also always collect." The transmission ended. Stood in silence for a long moment, staring at the blank screen. His generals shifted nervously, waiting for orders. Finally, sat back down on his throne. "Foolish mammals," he muttered. "They think words can stop us. They think threats can frighten the Dominion." He waved his clawed hand. "Set course for Prime. We attack in 3 days." His generals hurried to obey. The fleet began to move, 600 warships sliding through space like sharks through dark water. But somewhere in the back of his mind could not forget the look in the human's eyes. That calm certainty, that complete lack of fear. He had seen many things in his long years of conquest, but he had never seen anything like that. He pushed the thought away. The humans were weak. They would learn. They would all learn. The Dominion took what it wanted. Always. The Battle of Prime. The Dominion fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel like a swarm of metal insects, 600 warships spreading across the darkness of space. At their center, the Iron Fang led the way, Warlord standing on his bridge with his arms crossed, ready to watch a world fall. Then he saw what was waiting for him. The human Third Fleet hung in space between the Dominion and Prime. 200 warships, arranged in a defensive formation that covered the planet like a shield. They were smaller than Dominion ships, less impressive, less frightening. But they were there, standing in their way. On the bridge of the human flagship Remembrance, Admiral Park watched the enemy fleet arrive. She had known they were coming. She had prepared for this moment for weeks. But seeing 600 warships appear in front of her still made her heart beat faster. She was not young anymore. Her hair was streaked with gray, and her face carried the weight of years of difficult decisions. But her eyes were still sharp, and her voice was still steady. "All ships hold position," she said into her communicator. "Wait for my command." Beside her, studied the tactical display with intense focus. He had spent 15 years designing weapons and strategies for exactly this moment. He knew every weakness in Dominion ships. He knew every trick they used. He had prepared countermeasures for all of them. "They're spreading out," he said quietly, "trying to surround us." Nodded. "Let them. The closer they get, the better our weapons work." Across the fleet, human crews prepared for battle. In the medical bays, Lee and hundreds of doctors and nurses stood ready to receive wounded. In the engine rooms, engineers made final checks on systems that would need to work perfectly. In the fighter bays, pilots climbed into their small ships, knowing that many of them would not come back. On the surface of Prime, millions looked up at the sky. They could not see the ships, but they knew they were there. They knew that strangers from a distant world had come to die for them. Elder, old, and frail now, stood in the central square of the capital city. He remembered a human captain who had tried to pay him for saving lives. He remembered saying that helping was enough. He had never imagined that the humans would remember. He had never imagined they would come back. His voice boomed across all frequencies. "Human fleet, you have one chance to withdraw. Leave now and I will let you go. Stay and you will die." His response was immediate. They are under our protection. We're not going anywhere. Laughed, then you will burn with them. The battle began. The Dominion fleet attacked from all sides, their weapons lighting up the darkness with fire and death. Missiles streaked through space. Energy beams cut through the void. The sound of explosions, carried through ship hulls and radio waves, filled every human ear. But the humans did not run. They fought. New weapons tore through Dominion shields like they were made of paper. Cannons that he had designed in secret laboratories punched holes in enemy hulls. Missiles that tracked Dominion engine signatures found their targets with terrible accuracy. The Dominion had expected easy prey. They found something else entirely. Human pilots flew their fighters into the heart of enemy formations, dodging fire, striking at weak points, leading Dominion ships into traps. When their weapons ran out, some of them flew their ships directly into enemy engines. They did not hesitate. They did not stop. On the Remembrance commanded with calm precision. She moved ships like chess pieces, blocking attacks, creating openings, keeping her fleet alive. Every few minutes she received reports of lost ships, lost crews, lost friends. She filed the grief away for later. Right now she had a battle to win. The Iron Fang is moving forward, reported. Wants to finish this personally. Nodded, good, let him come. The flagship of the Dominion pushed through the battle, crushing smaller ships that got in its way. Stood on his bridge, his yellow eyes burning with rage. The humans were dying, yes, but they were also fighting. They were hurting his fleet. That was unacceptable. All ships concentrate fire on the human flagship, he ordered. Destroy their leader. The Iron Fang turned its weapons on the Remembrance. Fire poured towards ship, enough to destroy a dozen vessels. But other human ships moved to block the attack. They put themselves between the Iron Fang and the Remembrance, taking hits meant for their admiral. Ships exploded. Crews died, but they did not move. Stared in disbelief. They're sacrificing themselves, one of his generals said, his voice confused. Why would they do that? Had no answer. The battle raged for 18 hours. 18 hours of fire and death and destruction. The humans lost ship after ship, crew after crew, but they did not break. They did not run. They fought with broken ships and wounded crews and failing systems. They fought with spite. Lee worked without rest, saving lives that should have been lost. She developed new techniques on the spot, finding ways to keep soldiers fighting even when their bodies should have given up. Her medical teams performed miracles. Directed the battle from the tactical center, constantly adjusting, constantly adapting. When one strategy failed, he invented another. When weapons ran low, he found new ways to use what they had left. And through it all commanded, she did not waver, she did not doubt, she simply refused to lose. Finally, after 18 hours, something broke. It was not the humans. Watched in horror as his fleet began to crumble. Ships that had survived 100 battles were being torn apart by these soft mammals and their clever weapons. Generals who had never known defeat were screaming for retreat. He had lost over 300 ships, half his fleet, the greatest force the Dominion had ever assembled, and it was being destroyed by enemies who should have been easy prey. "My lord," one of his generals said, his voice shaking, "we must withdraw, we cannot win this." Wanted to refuse. He wanted to fight until every human was dead. But he looked at the battlefield, at the burning hulks of his ships, at the human fleet still standing strong, and he knew the truth. He had lost. "All ships," he said, the words like poison in his mouth. "Retreat." The Dominion fleet turned and ran. On the Remembrance watched them go. She had lost over 60 ships. Thousands of her people were dead, but Prime stood behind her, safe and whole. She had won. A transmission came through from the planet below. Elder's face appeared on her screen. He looked older than she remembered, but his eyes were the same, deep and ancient and full of wonder. "Why?" he asked softly. "Why would you do this? Why would you sacrifice so much for us?" Thought about a young woman on a dying ship, watching strangers give everything to save her. She thought about a captain who tried to pay a debt that could never be repaid. She thought about all the years in between when she had never forgotten. "You helped us once," she said simply. "We remembered." Was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, tears began to fall from his ancient eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. Nodded. "The debt is paid. The reckoning." The galaxy expected humanity to celebrate their victory and go home. They were wrong. 6 months after the Battle of Prime, Admiral Park stood on the bridge of a new flagship, the Remembrance II, built to replace the ship that had barely survived the battle. Around her, a fleet 3 times larger than before spread across the stars. Reinforcements had come from Earth, from the colonies, from everywhere humans lived. They had not come to defend. They had come to hunt. Had retreated to Dominion space, hiding behind his remaining ships, waiting for the humans to go away. But the humans did not go away. Instead, they followed. They pushed into Dominion territory, system by system, world by world. They were not coming to conquer. They were coming to liberate. Had developed new technologies during the months after the battle. Weapons that could disable Dominion ships without destroying them. Communication systems that could reach the enslaved populations on Dominion worlds. Devices that could break the control collars that the Dominion used to keep their slaves obedient. On every world the humans reached, they found the same thing. Species that had been conquered, enslaved, broken. Species that had given up hope. Species that had forgotten what freedom felt like. The humans reminded them. Lee led medical teams that moved from world to world, healing wounds that went back generations. She trained local doctors, built hospitals, created supply chains for medicine and food. She worked until she could barely stand, then worked some more. "Every life matters," she told her teams when they grew tired. "Every single one." On a frozen world called, they freed a species of small, furry creatures who had been used as slave labor in Dominion mines for centuries. The creatures did not understand at first. They thought the humans were just new masters. Then the humans took off their collars, gave them food, showed them the ships that would take them back to there. The creatures wept. On a jungle world called, they found the survivors of a species that the Dominion had nearly wiped out. Only a few thousand remained, hiding in caves, waiting to die. The humans brought them medicine, protection, hope. The survivors asked why. Why would strangers help them? "Because someone helped us once," told them, "and we learned that kindness matters." Word spread through the galaxy. The humans were coming, not to conquer, not to rule, but to free. Species that had been too afraid to fight back began to rise up. Resistance movements that had been crushed for generations found new strength. The Dominion began to crumble from within. Watched his empire fall apart and could not understand it. He had ruled through fear, through strength, through the simple truth that the powerful took what they wanted. That was how the galaxy worked. That was how it had always worked. But the humans did not follow those rules. They fought not for power, not for territory, not for wealth. They fought because they remembered. They fought because they cared. It made no sense to him. His own generals began to turn against him. They had seen what was coming. They had seen the human fleet growing larger every day, fed by ships from species that had once been neutral, species that now wanted to help the humans finish what they had started. In the end, was captured by his own people. They dragged him from his throne and handed him over to the humans, hopping for mercy. The final treaty was signed on Prime. It was Elder's idea to hold the ceremony there. He wanted the galaxy to see where everything had started. He wanted them to understand. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in the central square of the capital. Stood at the center, gray-haired and tired but standing straight. Beside her stood, and hundreds of other humans who had fought and bled and sacrificed to get to this moment. Across from them stood the new leaders of the Dominion, generals who had overthrown, who were desperate to end the war that was destroying their empire. The terms were simple. The Dominion would release all enslaved species immediately. They would pay reparations to every world they had conquered, starting with the. They would dismantle their war machine and never threaten their neighbors again. And if they ever broke these terms, if they ever attacked the or any of humanity's allies, they would face total war. The Dominion leaders signed without argument. They had no choice. When the ceremony was over, approached. He was very old now, using a walking stick, his wings folded and thin. But his eyes still held that ancient wisdom, that gentle light. "I have a question," he said softly. Smiled, ask. "Will you always be this way, this intense?" Thought about it for a long moment. She thought about the crew of the Wanderer, most of them gone now. She thought about all the soldiers who had died at Prime and in the campaign that followed. She thought about the millions of beings who were now free because humanity had refused to let an old debt go unpaid. "We're humans," she finally said. "We never forget a kindness, and we never forgive a wrong." She looked up at the sky, at the stars that stretched forever in every direction. "The galaxy will learn." Studied her face for a long moment. Then he made that soft sound that was the way of laughing. "You know," he said, "when I rescued your ship all those years ago, I thought it was just a small thing, a simple act of kindness. I never imagined it would lead to all of this." Nodded. "That's the thing about kindness," she said. "You never know where it will lead. You never know what seeds you're planting." She put her hand on the old alien's shoulder. "You saved 12 people on a broken ship, and because of that millions are free today. Entire species have been liberated. An empire has fallen," she smiled. "That's the power of a single act of kindness. That's what you taught us." His ancient eyes filled with tears again. "I am glad," he whispered. "I am glad we stopped to help." Around them, the celebration continued. Humans and dozens of other species laughed and talked and shared food. Old enemies became new friends. Old wounds began to heal. The galaxy would never be the same. In the years that followed, humanity became known as something new. Not the strongest species, not the oldest, but something else. Something that made other species think twice before harming the innocent. Something that made the weak and the helpless look to the stars with hope. Humanity became known as the species that remembered. The species that paid its debts. The species that never, ever let go. And in quiet corners of the galaxy, beings would tell the story of a small cargo ship that broke down in empty space, and an elder who stopped to help. They would tell the story of how that single act of kindness changed everything. They would tell the story of the humans. And they would remember.